so I'm working with Schoolie. So we do PSK. We did the first ever hip hop tour of Europe and Australia, New Zealand, um, uh, 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 England, Canada. And it was just, I gotta tell you, man, some of it was pretty hairy. Like Scotland, Scotland was like, you know, people there are like cool, but we're touring with Big Audio Dynamite, who were the guy, Mick Jones from the Clash, right? And so these are all Clash fans, right? And
Right.
so there'd be like 2,800 Clash fans and like three people to see the hip hop the hip hop artist opening up. And so they've never seen an MC with in a DJ before. Like you may as well popped out of a spaceship. You know what I mean? And I at the time I was just too young to really appreciate it, but we were like trailblazing then. We were doing like you know we were like we've had people throw bottles and cans at us on stage and shit. I mean, it was like some of those play. I mean, I didn't care, you know what I mean. But looking back in retrospect, it was important, And what was really important was the fact that Schoolie was the first hip hop artist to ever be on the cover of New Music Enemy and where they had New Music Express over there and the
Echo.
Echo, New Music Express. No, it was like New Music. It
Black
had like an R&B name, like blue R rhythm, like
Blues. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm talking about, right? So
Yep.
he made the cover of both those at once, right? And he was on. So we got what we did was that we did a deal with Rhythm King, which was a division of Mute Records. Mute Records was started by a guy named Daniel Miller. It's an independent label, and they gave us the money to record the album, and so we did the Yellow album, PSK album, and shit. Like I mean, it just got it. Let's put it this way: it did so well, um, you know. But independently, I think it was more than Schoolie wanted to really. I mean, he like all artists, he just really he wanted to perform. He wanted to do his thing, right? I don't think he had the patience to be a label. We did a lot of cool records, right? We had the Royal Ron Upstate Now record, which is awesome. We did Robbie B and DJ Jazz Rock to Go Go, right? But
Right.
but other than that, we had a meeting with Capitol Records. They were the first label we talked to, and they flew me out there, and I met with Tom Wally and Tim Devine. Tom would go on to found Interscope with with Jimmy Iovine and Ted Fields, who was the heir to Marshall Fields department stores. So they said, well, you guys don't have enough of a history of being a label with artists and everything to do a label deal, right? So that didn't happen. But after it all said and done, we ended up signing with Jive, right? And Jive, I gotta tell you, man, for terms of hip hop, it was like Def Jam and Jive. That was it.
Right.
Jive was started by these two guys from South Africa, Ralph Simon, Clive Calder. They came up to England and they started the Zamba Group, which was like a publishing company. They're pretty smart about what they did. They had a company called Dream Hire, right, which they hired out equipment for rehearsals and studios and stuff. So, and they had a studio called Battery. So they had studios and equipment rentals in New York, right, and in England, right. So if you signed with them, they'd give you an advance, but you gave it back to them because they had you record in their studios with their producers, their engineers, and they had the public, like all that stuff. It was really like a well thought out, really well executed. But really, for the guy who really like made that place run on the American side, signed all the great hip hop artists was Barry Weiss, right?
Right.
Barry was just like, I think he's one of the most talented executives out there. But the problem was that Jive was used to doing things in a pretty not to say they're not innovative, they are innovative. They've done like reverse marketing and stuff like that with Europe and everything. But they their whole thing immediately was that, well, we need Schoolie to do songs for Black radio. And it's like, what? Black what do you mean to do songs for Black radio? And And I got why they did, because they're spending money at Black Radio. Problem is, Black Radio didn't really play Schoolie D, right?
Right.
And so Schoolie had like a kind of like a huge alternative hip hop, following, right? He influenced the Beastie Boys. He's it's like with Susie and the Banshees and the Chemical Brothers, and all these people sampled him. And the thing was that he's not that type of hip hop artist, right? To do songs like for Black Radio. So it kind of fucked him up, right? And I don't think he ever recovered from it. So he did a lot of cool records for Jive, but after it was all said and done, he ended up doing a record at Capitol. Then he did a record with me at Ruffhouse, and then he met a guy named Abel Ferrara, who's a filmmaker. Abel did The King of New York, which Schoolie did the music for, and Abel gave Schoolie like a whole new way of looking at things. He basically said, "Look, man," he goes, these record labels, and you're putting out records and everything, and they're not, so what you do and what they want are like two totally different worlds, right?
Right.
And the thing is, here's what I never understood. It's like you want to do songs for Black Radio so he could eventually cross over. Well, the thing is, we already sold hundreds of thousands of albums to the audience, the white audience, and cross over. Like we already did it. You know what I mean? So now you want to go back and like refortify him at Black Radio, and it never happened. And I think so Schoolie just suddenly got into doing soundtrack stuff, and he did a bunch of movies with Abel. He ended up doing the music for the Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which is a show. It's on Adult Swim, and the other thing is that he was an artist, like a illustrator before he became a hip hop artist, and he does really well with his paintings. He had a showing at MoMA. He did a gallery showing one night in New York. He made like almost $200,000 selling paintings, in one night. Well, he had people like Questlove, bought a painting for $50,000. That a couple paintings like that helped. But the thing is, he kind of found like a new place. And we just put out a new Schoolie album. Whoops! Oh boy! Oh boy! Did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's ultramagnetic. It's B-Real. So we got a B-Real record too. I have I put out like 35 albums in the last year and a half.
Wow.
I got 3 RZA records. Let's see. I got Wu-Tang, Cypress Hill, Onyx, Styles P, and Havoc. I had 2 Arrested Development double album sets.
Wow.
Cool Keith, Ultramagnetic, Ice-T. I got Chuck D. We got a new one from him, We Wreck Stadiums, which is a fucking dope record. Then I have the DJ Too Tough records, right? Lost Archives, and I got all like the Spit Slam stuff, I know I'm missing some people here. What's that?
Stetsasonic earlier.
Oh, Stetsasonic, yeah. So yeah, I got records, man. So anyhow, I just don't have them all here to show you. To shamelessly plug my records while I'm here, right? Okay, so where were we? So we signed with Jive, right? So it's get to the point where Schoolie's like kind of doing his thing, and at this point, I had met Joe Nicolo, right? And so we decided we're going to do a label, right?
Right.
And so we do this label, and we're trying to come up with a name for it, and we're sitting in our lawyer's office one day, and there was a cassette on the lawyer's desk, and the lawyer went out of the room, and the cassette said Ruffhouse, Roughhouse, and it was a rock band, and I knew of this band. I think I recall that they had like spandex with their bellies hanging over, like one of those type of thing right there. So they didn't need the name as far as I was concerned, right?
Right.
So it was actually Joe's idea. Joe said we should use the name. I said, yeah, we should, man. It would be awesome, but we got to change the spelling. We should make it RUFF, right? So we changed the spelling of it, and that became our name. and we did a deal with a company out on the West Coast called Enigma. Enigma was a alternative music distribution company. Now they had Poison and they had Striper, right? Those were their big records, but they had a lot of stuff because the two brothers that owned it, Wes and Bill Hine, worked for a company called Gem, and they imported a lot of the music that I was into, like electronic music when I was playing that stuff. So anyhow, actually, Wes is going on to become one of the owners of one of the largest cannabis distribution companies in the United States. But he puts out a lot of really interesting blogs on LinkedIn. Wes Hine, Weshein, if anybody's interested in that stuff. And you know what I like about, when talking to him, he said, you know what? He goes, everybody wants to have their own weed brand. They want to do weed. Everybody wants to do a weed brand. He said, it's like, he goes, there's other businesses that make even more money related to cannabis that are easier to get into, right, than doing that, right? Like people are going to have smoking lounges and stuff like that. And he was telling me about this. I thought it was really interesting. But anyhow, so we start this label and we do this deal with Enigma and nothing happens. We put out a couple records, the records weren't the greatest records in the world. And we're there for a year. And when I was working with Schoolie, I had my office was Studio 4, our recording studio was in the basement or the concourse of this big office building in Philadelphia on North 3rd Street. It was an old tanning factory, loft type place, got made into offices and everything. And so they recorded Studio 4, which was Joe, his twin brother Phil, and a guy named Dave Johnson owned this recording studio. And they recorded like the Hooters, who are a rock band out of Philadelphia. They were on Columbia Records. They did really well. They sold millions of records. And their producer was a guy named Rick Chertoff. Rick had signed and did the Cyndi Lauper record, like all those Cyndi Lauper songs. That's all Rick. So Rick would come down and he was working on this guy named Tommy Conwell and the Young Rumblers, working on that record. And he would see because now all these labels that wanted to sign Schoolie, they couldn't sign them, were hiring me to promote their hip hop artists. So I was working NWA, Eazy-E, Tone Loc, Young MC, like all these records, right? And Rick Chertoff, the producer, he's a staff producer at Columbia Records, would come down and he would see all the records I had in the hallway, going to record pools and all that stuff. And he would come into my office and talk to me, right? And it was interesting. A lot of people had come in the office. I remember Puffy coming into that office when he was a A&R guy for Uptown, and he was working with this producer named Dr. Freeze that were recording in a studio down the hall. And I remember him coming into Ruffhouse, and he was sitting there, and he had his coat over his shoulder, and just sitting on a desk, like looking around the place. I said, "So what do you do, man?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm down in the studio down the hall." I said, "So where do you work? Like what project are you?" He goes, "Oh well, I'm A&R for Uptown Records, right?" And you know what? I gotta tell you something, man. I was impressed that he said it with like real pride. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, and because it used to bother me, like, after I did Columbia Records and everything, and I've been at Sony for like, my company has been there now, like for like, say it's 7 years at this point, right? At one point, I remember getting in the elevator one day, and there's these two younger guys that worked at Epic Records, and they were complaining about their gig. And it kind of pissed me off, because I know that they're easily making, these guys are probably making, $100,000, whatever a year, because, or whatever. And it's like, and they just like, they're like complaining, like, and we get to the bottom, like, and the doors open up. I said, guys, I can't help but I'm overhearing what you're saying. I said, you know that you should be like kissing the ground and thanking whatever higher power that you pray to that you have this gig. Do you know how many people want a gig in the record business, And so anyhow, I could appreciate, the Puffy at the time, being proud of his gig with Uptown Records. But anyhow, to make a long story even longer, so we're moving along. So we're so Rick Chertoff invites me up to have a meeting with him and Tommy Mottola, and they offer me a deal on a distribution deal, a boutique label on Columbia Records. And that was a big deal. Like that day, I left that building. And I remember walking through those doors in the CBS building in BlackRock, they called the building in New York, walking to the train station. Like, I didn't even call a cab. I had to walk because I couldn't believe the, like what had happened.